Greetings, duelists. It's Dionysus, aka Young Puds, coming at you guys with some information about side decking in the Gigavise deck, and honestly, Edison Format, and maybe even Yu-Gi-Oh! In general. I think this is one of the most common questions I see popping up in the Discord. That's how should I be side decking? What cards do I side deck? So let's just jump right into this presentation. This will be very quick, but hopefully you'll come away a much better duelist. So let's just break down how to build a side deck into 4 easy steps. Step 1, consider your matchups. What decks are you expecting to play against? Step 2, identify threats. What can these enemy decks do that will make you lose? What can you do to make them lose? Step 3, consider your options. There is a very large card pool available in Edison Format. A lot of cards do kind of the same thing, but are slightly different. For example, Dust Tornado and Twister both can destroy spell and trap cards, but have slightly different use cases. And then finally, test. So diving further in, consider your matchups. I actually did complete a tier list that goes over all of the relevant matchups that you could possibly encounter playing Gigavise. So if you haven't seen that video, pause this video, go watch that one. I think you'll find that is going to be very, very helpful. So when considering your matchups, you want to ask yourself, what decks am I losing to? What decks do I also expect to encounter? You know more than me what decks are played in your local area. At my locals, we have a lot of Lightsworn players, so I want to be ready for that. However, at a large tournament or even on the dueling book ladder, you might not expect to encounter so many Lightsworns. Step 2 is identifying threats. There's 2 aspects to this. Number 1 is what cards in my opponent's main deck do I lose to? For example, in Frog decks, when we're playing Gigavise, Fishborg Blaster, I think, is the main threat. If they have Fishborg Blaster online, they're going to be able to do their full combo. They're going to have an easier time breaking your board. They're going to present a legitimate threat. Without Fishborg Blaster, they're kind of forced to do block or use targeting effects that Titanial can handle. So we could identify Fishborg Blaster as a serious threat. You also want to consider when identifying threats what cards my opponent could be siding in that I will lose to. Almost every deck in Edison Format, except for maybe Frogs and the Mirror Match, is going to have Fossil Dynas in their side deck. Fossil Dyna is very clearly a powerful card against Gigavise strategies, potentially locking us out of the game. Therefore, we can expect Fossil Dyna to come in. We need to prepare for this with our side deck. So let's consider our options. You want to consider the threats. What cards could I use to answer this threat? For example, Fishborg Blaster, we could use a card like Transmigration Prophecy, or DD Crow, or perhaps Soul Release to remove it from the graveyard. You also want to consider what cards could I side in to answer my opponent's side options. If we're expecting something like Fossil Dyna, maybe we want to side in Forbidden Chalice to negate its effect and still be able to combo. If we're expecting our opponents to side in Royal Oppression, we'll want to side in Back Row Hate. Whether that's Breaker, whether that's Twister, whether that's Dust Tornado, or even Royal Decree, you have options and you want to consider those options. Another thing when you're comparing multiple cards that might accomplish one thing is how many use cases the card has. Some cards are really only good against something very specific. So if you're going to side in a card like that, you want to ask yourself how important it is to defeat that matchup. I think Gladiator Beast is an excellent example. Cards that are good against Gladiator Beasts are often not good against other decks in the format. Therefore, you have to ask yourself, is it worth dedicating parts of my side deck for Gladiator Beasts that might not be useful at all against other decks? Cards like Swallow Flip are fantastic against Gladiator Beasts. However, they really don't have any other use case. Is it worth dedicating 2, 3, 4 slots of your side deck for this one deck? These are questions that you need to ask yourself. And the only way to get good answers is step 4, testing. Now, when you're testing, you have to remember something. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game. Games are fun to play. Play them. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You're not going to build a perfect side deck overnight, and you can't be afraid to fail. You are going to lose a lot of games, especially playing a challenging deck like Gigavise. However, you've decided to play Gigavise because you understand that it is the best deck in the format. The cost to have access to the best deck of the format is losing a fair amount. However, every loss, you're going to learn something, you're going to get more information, you're going to be more prepared. Testing out new side deck cards is important, but sometimes they're not going to be a winner. You're not going to be testing something good. And the only way to know that it's not good is to test. And testing is also going to help you understand why something isn't good. So as much as we all just want to be able to say, all right, here is 15 cards, side these, and then you're going to win every time. Even if you were shown a perfect side deck, you probably wouldn't use it very effectively because you haven't put in the reps. So I really can't stress enough, especially playing a deck like Gigavise, take the time to play some games. Play as many games as you can, as often as you can, at locals, with your friends, on Dueling Book, enter tournaments, whatever it is, get your reps in. Now, here's some examples of side decks. These are all perfectly acceptable side decks. You see that there's some really common themes. All of these have Royal Decree in it. You probably want to be siding in Royal Decree. Most of these have Mystical Space Typhoon. You should probably be siding that if it's not in your main deck. You can see some of them are playing cards like Trap Dustshoot or Solemn Adjustment. These are cards that are they're very good if you're going first, but maybe they're not as good going second. So the pilots aren't willing to main deck them in case they do end up going second. However, if they know they're going first, you could just side them in. And finally, I do want to address what I call the Gigavise theorem, and if I may humbly suggest. And this is simply, Gigavise is the best deck of the format. If we are allowed to play, we are going to win. Therefore, I think it's much better to focus on stopping your opponent from stopping you rather than stopping your opponent. This means answers to Royal Oppression, answers to Fossil Dyna are going to be considerably more useful than cards like Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer that are just going to stop my opponent from playing. I hope this has given you some insight into side decking and has made you a more effective Gigavise duelist and a more effective Edison duelist. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you have any ideas for other Gigavise related content, please suggest those in the comments. Please subscribe. I'm trying to post Gigavise videos every day. I think this is the best deck of the format, and the only way to really show that is to get tournament results, and more people playing the deck is going to help us achieve that. Have a great day.